So make every morning a
Good Morning America.
with Pronto Sleep, available now at select Walgreens, Amazon, or at prontosleep.com.
Pronto Sleep from Rhinomed, bringing you advanced nasal therapies.
Staples has all the supplies for tax season this year, from tax forms to organizational supplies. And now you can save up to $15 on TurboTax software at Staples, where there's a whole lot more in store. Offer ends 2/8/20 while supplies last.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
7:07, Team Hochberg Traffic Center time, and Jim Telemonti.
Travel conditions are more challenging to the south. Northbound 394, traffic is heavy approaching 8094. There's a stall on the ramp there. We're also seeing much heavier traffic now on I-57 at the Bishop Ford Freeway. I-57, it's a 45-minute trip from I-80 to Ryan. Bishop Ford, 46 minutes. And there's a crash at Dalton Avenue in the right lane. Once you get to the Ryan, it's 40 minutes, 95th to downtown. Eden's 21 minutes, Lake Cook to the Junction. Kennedy, 34 minutes, O'Hare to downtown. The Eisenhower from 390, it's 46 minutes there. We're looking at delays on the northbound Tri-State Southwest Highway to the 83rd Street toll, from the Stevenson to 47th, and from the Reagan Tollway to the Bensonville Bridge. I'm Jim Telemonti on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Here's our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Some snow for this morning, maybe flurries as well. That'll be 1 to 2 inches on the ground, high 32. Becoming partly cloudy, snow shower tonight, low 25. Morning flurries tomorrow, otherwise a cloudy day, the high 34. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
27 at O'Hare, next news 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas, best beans, best roast, best coffee.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson.
Completely screwing this up. But it's actually a pretty deep dig, and it's pretty comprehensive in terms of the questions about how Democrat voters are trying to define this difficult, nebulous issue of electability in terms of informing their votes, how the press is understanding their role in the 2020 election, how the new DNC rules that were to empower the grassroots and ensure a diverse, multicultural, multi-generational field did or did not produce such a thing. So for more on this, let's get right to it. Andy Kroll, Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief for Rolling Stone. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
So let's just start, because I like this idea. Everybody throws around these terms and nobody stops to define them or sort of apply some standard by which to make assessments of the various candidates. And one of those phrases, those words, is electability. What is electability when it comes to the Democrat nominee in 2020? It doesn't seem like a lot of the voters you talk to have a handle on it.
They don't have a handle on it. You can talk to 5 voters in 5 different early primary states, and you'll get 5 different answers about what electability is, or what electability looks like, or what it hears like out on the campaign trail. The interesting kind of dichotomy here that I saw, the tension, was that when you talk to these Democratic voters, at the end of the day, the thing they really care about most, of course, is a candidate who they think can challenge and defeat Donald Trump in November. That, on that issue, on that side of things, there is almost unanimity. But then there's the question, okay, well, what does that actually mean, and what does that look like? And it's a complete scatter around, what that would actually take. I think the most honest guy that I talked to when I was writing the story was one who, quoted Socrates and said, "I know that I know nothing. I have no idea what electability is, and it's completely impenetrable to me." And I feel like that was the most honest answer anyone could probably give about electability right now.
And also, it doesn't seem like those regular, everyday voters are taking their cues from a Democrat establishment that says, at least right now, electability means someone other than Bernie Sanders.
No, I don't think they're taking their cues from that. I mean, I talked to plenty of voters who will give Bernie Sanders a fair look on the electability question, even though they are not part of the revolution movement. They are not 2016 Bernie Sanders supporters. They are not, quote unquote, Bernie bros. They really are open to anyone. And I really think that you're onto something there in terms of taking your cues from either the Democratic establishment or just the Democratic Party infrastructure. People aren't doing that as much anymore. The party doesn't have that kind of sway. In some cases, I think it actually dissuades people, or the party turns people off, and maybe they say, well, this is what the party is pointing me toward. I think I'm going to do the opposite. I think there's still some bitter feelings, and there's still some distrust of the Democratic National Committee from the 2016 race. And you see that as well folding into this whole electability question.
Well, the combination of what happened in Iowa plus the rules changes for debates, as well as the appointments to the DNC governing committee in Milwaukee, that hasn't helped build trust, I don't think.
No, it hasn't helped build trust. I'll point out that this story of mine with this headline, our Democrats screwing this up, came out on Sunday before the Iowa caucus. It's never a great feeling to see a state party like the Iowa Democratic Party completely screw up their first in the nation contest, though obviously the headline seemed to get more timely afterward in a sort of grim way. No, the things you point out don't engender trust as well. The DNC was supposed to have, let's start real quick after 2016. There was wide agreement that the DNC needed to rethink its role, that it needed to clean house, that it needed to make reforms to the process. The question is, are the reforms that they put in place for 2020 the right ones? I think the verdict at this point is that they're not. The field is supposed to be multi-generational, diverse, capable of elevating grassroots candidates. That really hasn't been the case. The candidates, apart from Mayor Pete Buttigieg, where the top contenders now are all known quantities, came into the race with big email lists, lots of money in the bank, and a network of supporters already. So that's like Senator Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. And obviously the Iowa caucus has shown that maybe replacing Iowa at the front of the line would have been a good idea as well. So I don't think those reforms have helped build trust. I think that the debacle in Des Moines has actually damaged that trust further. And we're going to have another round of DNC changes, maybe a whole other round of cleaning house after this 2020 race probably, to try to fix these problems yet again.
Yeah, and the DNC swooped into Des Moines, and, it's like the hanging Chad controversy. They're counting all the preference cards, and hopefully we'll have a final count.
Right.
They said that we will earlier today, but does that make the situation even more chaotic and leave people more confused?
It's going to leave people more confused simply by virtue of there not having been an outcome. We don't know who won. And the longer this drags out, the longer that leaves open space for people to say that the quote-unquote quality control that they are engaging in could be nefarious. Are they tampering with the results? I mean, I will, for now, take the Iowa Democratic Party at its word that they are just taking as long as they are to make sure that everything is verified and everything is on the up and up. But of course, this bungled Iowa caucus does not help confidence in the result. The DNC parachuting in is both completely expectable, but also not helping in confidence. And this is an election in which election interference, these issues of misinformation, online propaganda are at the front of everyone's minds. And then the first contest for the Democratic side has this huge screw up, is not what they wanted as a party, and is not going to help this question of, the confidence in the security and the integrity of our elections.
And Russian hacking had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, well, and it also it also helps Michael Bloomberg, and it's a great narrative for Bernie Sanders, who's otherwise spends most of his time railing against rich people, to use. because you mitigate the bounce that the victor or the overperformers get coming out of Iowa. Nate Silver had a good write-up on this at 538 blog, too, in terms of how they mapped out the primary election and how what happened in Iowa changes everything because there is so much media attention for such an extended period of time going into Iowa that the victor and the overperformers get a substantial bounce, the kind of bounce that is second only to the victor on Super Tuesday. And now that's completely blunted. And, of course, the billionaire is the one guy, I mean, the real billionaire who's a threat, Bloomberg, is the one guy who didn't participate in Iowa. So the rest of the candidates don't get the bounce that they deserve, particularly, think, Pete and Bernie. And now that just redounds to the benefit of Michael Bloomberg, who doubled down with his ad buy right after the debacle.
The thing that listeners always have to remember about Iowa every 4 years is that Iowa is as much a media spectacle as it is an actual electoral event.
Yes. Yeah.
You count on, if you are a candidate coming out of Iowa on top, you count on more than just the delegates that you've collected, which aren't actually that many because Iowa is not a big state. You count on that huge surge of media attention that shoots you out of a cannon onto New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada. Think about Barack Obama in 2008, obviously. John Kerry, 2004, and also Donald Trump in his own way in 2016 showed that there was more to his rolling media spectacle of a campaign than just speeches and tweets, that he could actually get votes at the ballot box. When you don't have that bump, when it is a big muddle and the media kind of throws up its hands and says, we don't really know who won, and anyway, we got to catch our plane to New Hampshire, so we're just going to go there next.
But can you explain?
Yeah, there is no bump out of that, and that's a huge problem. Mayor Pete probably was banking on that Obama 08 style bump, and when you don't get it, it completely changes the direction of the campaign right out of the gate.
Yeah, and I personally think Pete Buttigieg did well because he had the Iowa pretty much to himself. I mean, he got to be able to go in front of crowds that he wouldn't have either ways been able to because 4 senators that were off the campaign trail for the impeachment trial. So the impeachment trial, I think, helped him more than anyone, don't you?
Well, for sure. When you have the people of Iowa to yourself, more or less. I mean, if I'm any of these campaigns that is in the top tier of the Democratic field, and I'm the angriest, it's Mayor Pete. I mean, they should have had their Obama 08 moment from the looks of the partial results that have come out so far, because, of course, we somehow still don't have the complete outcome. But, of course, if I were at his campaign, I'd be the angriest of anyone. And, as you rightly point out, if Bloomberg can stand on the sidelines watching all this and say, that was a complete mess, you should just go for my campaign and on Super Tuesday. And without a clear front runner, without any sort of sense of quote-unquote momentum, again, one of those great media terms, the field remains wide open, and that absolutely plays into Mike Bloomberg's hand. I got an email from his campaign yesterday that said Mike was the true winner of Iowa or something like that. It tells you exactly what they're trying to they're trying to push right now.
Yeah, and he's polling third in New Hampshire.
So the DNC rules and what they've produced, you make an interesting point in your piece. The most powerful people in the primary up to this point have arguably been the pollsters. And what a development that is, that rather than empowering the grassroots and getting the energy up, you're empowering pollsters who, and I know this perception is a little bit inflated, but pollsters who were held up for being so spectacularly wrong with respect to 2016.
That's the deep irony of it for me. There was a lot of hand-wringing and a little bit of self-reflection after 2016 about how, especially state-level polls, got it wrong. Why did they get it wrong? There's interesting research, and I've had some really interesting conversations with political consultants that the traditional ways of polling just don't work anymore, that in some cases Trump supporters just don't answer the phone when they talk to pollsters, and so the modern polling technologies don't really reflect the electorate. Yet the DNC ended up going with a criteria that empowered these pollsters and really shaped the field. And I talked to campaign manager of a former Democratic campaign who told me that when they would go to local elected officials in South Carolina, New Hampshire, or Iowa, and they'd say, "Hey, will you endorse our candidate?" The candidate would say, or the person they approached would say, "Well, I really like you, and you're doing all the right things, and you just opened that campaign office in my city, in my district. I think that's great, but you're not polling that well. You really got to do better in the polls. And when you do better in the polls, let me know." And it became this proxy for whether you were a good candidate or not, which, obviously polls reflect in their own semi-warped way the views of the people they spoke with, but they're not the be-all and end-all. And yet that's what they became in the Democratic primary. They became a sign of, there's that word again, likability. And when candidates couldn't make it to the stage because of polls or donations, that essentially said you're not really a viable candidate. And it led to the Kirsten Gillibrands, the Cory Bookers, the Julian Castros of the world dropping out of the race. So that's another one of these things I think the DNC's really got to rethink going into the next presidential cycle.
And perhaps even less self-reflective than the DNC or the political parties generally, the media and political journalists, and what exactly they understand their role to be other than as political prognosticators. This seems to be also an open-ended question per your piece in Rolling Stone.
Yeah, it's a section of the piece that obviously doesn't make me a lot of friends with my colleagues in the journalism business, but it's pretty shocking if you think about it. Just that you stop and say 2016 should have been a heart attack moment for political journalism specifically, one of those major life events where you stop and say, okay, I need to rethink what I've been doing and reassess and come up with a new plan going forward. And there wasn't any of that after the 2016 election for political journalism. There was a little bit of a conversation around maybe this should happen, a little bit of a conversation around how did we miss it, but they just moved on. We just moved on. I have to include myself here. And moved on because the next greatest story in the 21st century of American politics had just begun, the presidency of Donald Trump, just soon after the election of Donald Trump. And I think that was a real missed opportunity. I think there was and still is a real need to figure out a way to cover campaigns and elections that actually gets at what people are thinking and feeling where they live on the ground, and also gets away from the kind of insider horse race journalism that only is kind of comprehensible to a small group of political elites. Maybe it'll happen after 2020, depending on what happens in the 2020 election, but I do think it's one of the big mistakes of our part of the last 4 or 5 years.
He is Andy Kroll. He's the D.C. bureau chief for Rolling Stone. Check out his column, which I'll tweet out. Are the Democrats completely screwing this up? Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
And he joined us on our Turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. If you need windows, call the exterior experts.
Call Crumweedy.
Mark Olson and Greg Olson of Crumweedy. Well, they run a third-generation family business that's been doing Chicagoland exteriors now since 1953. And for them, it's all about trust, and they truly share your values. Why windows from Crumweedy? Now, Crumweedy windows are not offered anywhere else in Chicagoland. They are exclusive, and that's why they can offer a lifetime material and labor installation guarantee. A lifetime. That's a great investment for your home. Windows from Crumweedy are Energy Star rated, unlike